let's just look at recent World Cups. Okay, 2002, our opening game was against Portugal, and honestly, not only did we shock the world, I think we shocked our own team. Like, holy crap, we're up 3-0 on Portugal in the first 30 minutes of the game. And if you actually go back and watch that game probably should have ended 3-3. I mean, Portugal were all over us by the end. It ended up 3-2, and we got fortunate to end up winning that one 3-2. But whatever, we got a result in the first game. 2006, we get our hasses handed to us, and we lose 3-0. I said hasses. I was going to say, hey, I don't know what I was going to say, but we got our asses handed to us, and we didn't get through our group. 2010, we get a draw fortuitously because Robert Green made a mistake, but it was 1-1. Even though Josie Altidore had a good chance there, let's say 1-1 was a fair result. We got something positive from that first game against probably the hardest opponent in the group. Mm-hmm. And 2014, we beat Ghana 2-1 off a late header by John Anthony Brooks after Clint Dempsey scored in the first minute. We don't qualify for 18, but that first group game is so incredibly important. Wales knows this. Iolo talked about it. We got a result in the last Euros against Switzerland. We didn't play well, but we scraped and we got that result. We played against a Turkey team that wasn't playing very well. We got a 2-0 result, and we lost narrowly to Italy in the last game, and we got through. That's what we set out to do, and we did it. And it's not always pretty. And God, this makes me.
So the U.S. definitely has the U.S. seems to have the hardest schedule then, right? Because you play England in the middle.
Yes.
That seems pretty hard because
it
puts everything on that first game, because your game 1, game 3, you don't get first game. You go into game 2 with something different against England. Going to be harder. And then game 3 might be the one where you've got to get all your points. And if you don't navigate that, again, it's a game that you have to be able to play against 2 other teams in your group that are very capable opponents, not that are just hoping to sort of punch you in the mouth one time in these games and get out with something. They're capable of keeping possession. They're capable of dictating the run of play at times. They're capable of getting something out of set pieces. And so it's that first game for the U.S. and Wales is and it seems cliche to say, but the most crucial for both teams through the navigation of the group.
Well, I get the sense, this is me, maybe I'm always a glass half full type guy, but I just get the sense that it's going to come down to that game against Iran, and we're going to need all 3 points for sure against them. Every team in the group is looking at Iran as the slam dunk 3 points. It's not going to be that, of course, but I can understand why they're doing that, especially with their lack of preparation and where they are as a national team and as a federation, just not getting those guys enough valuable games to make sure they're sharp for this. But there's still obviously plenty of time to get them where they need to be. Now, Patrick came out and said, hey, again, the Nations League final against Mexico, we were down a couple times. We came back on set pieces and found a way to get back into that, and then ultimately beat Mexico in extra time. Horvath saved that penalty against Guardado to go 3-2. That was the famous penalty and celebration where Christian Pulisic took off his shirt in the corner. So yes, we have that as an example. I'm looking at World Cup qualifying and Gold Cup. It didn't seem like we had to fight back in any of the Gold Cup games. We were up with a 1-1 draw against Canada in the second game of World Cup qualifying. We were up 1-0, gave up that goal. That was the last game, I think, for John Anthony Brooks. And then we went down to Honduras. And remember, that was our best. I think you and I, that's like our favorite second half we've ever seen from this team, or a 45-minute performance where we came back and scored 4 goals at halftime. It was kind of a Ricardo Pepi coming out.
Which is hard, though, because contextually, for anybody who's never experienced playing away in CONCACAF, that is really hard to turn around and turn a crowd against themselves and turn a team against themselves when you're down away from home. It's a really, there's some context to that that's hard to understand, because you're like, well, the U.S. of course comes out in the second half and should beat Honduras. Yeah, at home for sure. Every time.
So we went down to Panama. Yeah. We lost that one 1-0. Obviously, we made a lot of changes, like 8 changes. We weren't big fans of that. The Costa Rica game, that was another one. We went down 1-0 and found a way back into that one. That one was at home, where Serginho Dest hit a bombasso, and then Timo Weah scored later in that game to get us the 3 points. So yes, there is some evidence of us coming back and finding ways to get back in games. And I guess, was it Jamaica? Did Jamaica score first, or did we score first against Jamaica? It was Timo Weah scored first, and then they hit footer. Yeah, that's right. We scored first in that one. Canada. So that was pretty much it in terms of us having to fight back from, or having examples of us getting back into it. But
I mean, there's some value in the Gold Cup. Yeah, El Salvador, but there's some value in the Gold Cup final and of leaving it late against Mexico and sort of having to sort of scrap that out, because that That one had sort of the building of some tension, and that was obviously a mixed squad, different than the Nations League. But some of those players are now crucial in the national team from that window. And so again, it's hard because we're talking about regional experience, right? We don't have big tournament experience. The Gold Cup does matter, but in the context of Nations League, it was sort of broken up. Whereas, Wales has a Euros to look at where they were successful in the grand scheme of things. And now they're in the Nations League where they're constantly under pressure in these official tournament type things where the US, again, El Salvador, not as sort of the magnitude isn't there of this round of the Nations League. And so, yeah, I mean, if you're saying it's going to come down to that,
I'm just getting
Iran
that feeling
game,
now. It's going to come back down to that. It's going to come to that Iran game. I mean, we could get 2 draws. We could be, Wales and I just feel like we're going to need something. It might just be a draw against Iran, but even that becomes a slippery slope. When when you go out there and you try to play for a draw, it's just a weird mentality. It's just like, let's not lose this one, as opposed to actually going out there on your front foot and trying to make it happen. All right. I mean, we'll have plenty of time to get into that Wales game. A big shout out again to Iola Chung, a BBC journalist from Wales, from joining us. Obviously, some fantastic insight. We'll make sure we'll get him back on the show very, very soon. Let's talk about Gareth Bale's newest league, though, MLS, because there were some good performances from some U.S. men's national team players, Heath Pearce. We saw Christian Roldan and Jordan Morris leading the way for Seattle Sounders 3-0 against Sporting Kansas City. Jordan Morris scored his 4th league goal and his 6th across all competitions. He scored another header. The guy's all of a sudden popping up as our Peter Crouch, by the way, and just banging in headers. He's our big, tall guy up top. He's trying to make a play for the number 9 spot, but not to be outdone. Paul Arriola from FC Dallas also scored. He now has 8 goals in 15 games for FC Dallas, and head coach Nico Estevez, who was the assistant for Greg Berhalter prior to taking the FC Dallas job. That's one more than the 7 that Arriola scored for DC United in 25 games in 2018. So Arriola is clearly on fire. You had him in your top 10 power rankings list. Now, let me give this as a top. Let's go to the top 6 scorers in MLS, okay? Jesus Ferreira is on top with 9. He's tied with Jeremy Abobasi from San Jose with 9. Sebastian Driussi from Austin got 9. Brandon Vasquez from FC Cincinnati's got 8. Hani Mukhtar from Nashville's got 8, and Paul Arriola now has 8. 4 out of those 6 names for the scoring charts in MLS are all U.S. men's national team eligible, but only Ferreira and Arriola are actually involved in our player pool in a meaningful way. You think there might be a late shout for a Bobasi or a Vasquez to potentially? I mean, we've seen it before. We've talked about it. We talked about 2010 and Edson Buttle. You think if these guys just keep going and get up to 20 goals, that Greg Berhalter would give them a shot?
Yeah, I mean, again, we've just increased the roster by 3 spots. And so while you were looking at like a Ricardo Pepi maybe being your sleeper pick, should he not be in scoring form right now or going into the World Cup, you've now got a little bit more depth where you can say, hey, Ricardo Pepi, I'm going to bring him anyway because I still think he's our best striker. But I need to bring these guys that are scoring, right? Whether that's Vasquez or otherwise, I think that, or could Bobasi even. I just think that there is, and I'm sure they're getting lots of looks at these guys, and I know there's plenty of reasons not to bring them in at this point. But if they're in top form and that continues for the next, you're going to be talking about 16, 17 goals, even pushing that 20 goal mark. That form is worth something or valuable. And again, you go as Greg Berhalter's mentioned all these times, like the thing about all those guys is that they were strikers, right? In 2010, when he identified your question and answered it very directly, these guys are strikers. And when you're going to a World Cup, if we don't have strikers that are in form, it might be the perfect excuse to bring a couple other on deck, bring them into camp, see what happens. And there might be that what could have been the Chris Wondolowski moment in 2014, where he gets his chance at the end of the game, a goal that Wondolowski scores 99 out of 100 times. Unfortunately, that was the 1 out of 100 that he misses. But having a player like that you can put into these situations and go, they got the hot hand. If I get them anywhere and I get the ball to them anywhere in and around the goal, I think they have a good chance of converting. So you have to consider that. It'd be stupid not to, I think, at this point, especially with the fact it's not like we have a 1, 2, and a 3 there on our striker position. So, I mean, what's your thought on it?
No, it's and I see Ace of Spades. I think he's saying I wouldn't take the MLS top scorers honestly. Or I would take the MLS top scorer, honestly. Maybe he's saying it exactly how he wrote. But Yeah, I think there's something there. I mean, if you have someone who is feeling good about themselves and getting themselves in good spots, imagine how much better they would play potentially for the national team. I always enjoyed playing for the national team. I thought the game was easier in some ways because everybody was so good around me. I only had to focus on my job. Where when you're at the club level, no matter what club you play at, you always feel like you got to probably do a little bit more. You got to wear more than one hat because if you don't, your team probably won't get the same type of results if you're not doing multiple things. So at least that's how it felt in my perspective. Do you agree with that, Heath, that the national team felt easier in some ways?
Yeah, a lot of times the game got quicker and faster, more predictable. There was less erratic types of things because of that. And you have quality around you that, again, there's a few club situations where you feel the game is easier when you have a good group around you that listen well and move well. But generally, the national team felt
I mean, the competition's stiffer, don't get me wrong, but you also have the benefit of you're around guys that are so good at what they do. And to your point, it's funny that you use the word predictable because when I played it with next to Eddie Pope or Gooch or Chirundolo or Bocanegra, whoever, Demerit, I knew what those guys were going to do because they were so consistent in their decision making that it made it more predictable for me. And I don't want people to misinterpret that word in particular. I think that predictable is a good thing, especially when you're moving together in a group and not getting a lot of time to practice with each other, just having a really good understanding of how everybody moves. And I always enjoyed playing with the national team for
well, you
that
could be
reason.
more efficient all the time, right?
Yes,
like when you
exactly
played
right.
at a club team with players around you that maybe didn't have that consistency or quality that you held yourself to or didn't have that. There were times that you had to overcommit or overmove, which left gaps elsewhere because you had to compensate for things around you. Or in the national team, there's a certain level or a standard that that I need to cover here. The game is more played more as the position suggests versus being like, oh, I've got this person next to me, and I know if that ball goes over their shoulder, I've got to be a step closer to them. Otherwise we're screwed. And I've seen it happen over and over again that they get beat in these spots, or I've got this midfielder that's not willing to track back and club coach thinks it's okay because of what they bring offensively. There's a little bit more of that honesty to the game, which makes the game more predictable, makes it more efficient, and in a lot of ways easier. Of course.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of
but
nuance to that. And I feel like when players go to the national team too, the level of focus is different.
Yeah.
You can maybe get away with, let's say lazy sounds wrong, but you can maybe get away with some stuff at the club level. And understandably so. I mean, the club is a grind, right? It's a 10-month, 11-month journey, whereas the national team is so spotty. And when you're in, you got to be locked in. And I feel like when you come into that situation, if everybody locked in with those types of qualities that everybody has and that level of consistency in their decision making, it just makes the whole process a lot easier. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But if you had someone, just to bring this back into the number 9 spot, if you had somebody who was killing it in MLS and scores 20 goals from some of the names that we mentioned that were U.S. men's national team eligible, Bobasi and Vasquez in particular in this, then we could naturally potentially assume that when they got inserted into the national team, even though the level of competition is higher, that confidence is really hard to replicate and find if you don't have it and if you haven't been hitting the back of the net. And I think it might be worth a flyer to bring in a Vasquez or a Bobasi if they have scored and proven that they've been scoring consistently over a 10-month span. Heath, agree or disagree?
I fully agree.
All right.
Yeah. 26 players, you take your chance. Like,
you got to take your chance. Yeah. I mean, then you see how he trains because you have that training camp leading up to it. You can see how they fit within the group. And I know it's a bit of a risk. 1 or 2 or 3 of our picks are going to be a risk. We should just raise our hand. We should have talked about this with Yolo as well. But you're going to have 1 or 2 players that are maybe significant that are hurt as well. So then what happens, right? And there's going to be a lot of tinkering that is going to have to and that might include bringing a bit of a risky pick to come into the team. So we'll have to wait and see how that all plays out.